So now as, well, the game has been progressing, right? Slowly but surely. And also the meta was a little bit different from the get-go in our region. I just wanted to make a quick, well, updated ranked tier list. Ranked, keep in mind, this is just 3 versus 3 solo queue, okay? This is not team queue, this is just solo queue. Which is very important because in team queue, the meta will be very different. And obviously in 1v1, the meta will also be very different. But this is only for ranked solo queue, okay? And we're going to talk about all the classes, even the ones that aren't released besides artists, because they will probably take a while. And I will just try to put them in proper tiers. By the way, I was rank 9 on EU Central. I don't know if you care about that. But yeah, here we go, okay? And we'll start with the classes that were actually out or are already out before we go to the ones that are new or whatever, right? So let's start with War Dancer. War Dancer has actually been doing pretty well in comparison to the other regions, right? So generally speaking, I would say War Dancer is probably the highest A tier class in the game. I wouldn't say it's above that. By the way, we only have 4 tiers because I think it's pretty actually we could probably add one more tier here. We could add C tier. I think C tier is good. But yeah, I think War Dancer's highest A tier. Great mobility, good pressure. The tornadoes also a lot of damage, and depending on what class you play against, it's also really good to catch people. It's a lot of damage. Not a lot of classes can interrupt it consistently. Depends on the classes though. And the team utility is great as well. And in a meta which is very defensive but also very fast, I think War Dancer actually fits pretty well. So War Dancer highest A tier or somewhere in A tier. I think is pretty fair to say already. Artillerist. So a lot of people think Artillerist is broken, but in a lot of cases, Artillerist is only broken in combination with a Bard or even in combination with a Paladin. So just in solo queue alone, I would say Artillerist is probably lowest A tier. We will probably keep putting classes in between there. But generally speaking, Artillerist is actually doing better than expected, even in the Sorc-centric, support-centric meta. It can still do pretty well, but it struggles because, again, there's a lot of ranged hard CC and a lot of Ruffians, a lot of Rhapsodies that mitigate a lot of damage too. So I think this is pretty fair. And yeah, obviously it's a one-trick pony class, one-shot combos, and that's basically all it has. It's very, very sturdy, tanky, and is hard to deal with, especially for new players. But the higher you go, the harder it will be to climb on this, right? Bard. I will say Bard on low elo is probably somewhere where Artillerist is. In high elo, it's fairly like mid S tier. So I would say Bard is either highest A tier in solo queue or lowest S tier. So I'll just put her in lowest S tier for now. She struggles because obviously Bard does not do a whole lot of damage herself. So she relies on her teammates a little bit more than, well, every other support in the game. And but the Rhapsody that you have, the buffs that you provide, the CC, and even some combos are pretty good, and even the Awakening is really good as well. So it's a good class, but it's not as good as well some other classes we'll get into in just a second. Berserker, I would also put somewhere around Artillerist. I would even argue Berserker is a little bit above Artillerist, like one slot. Although I think it depends on team comps, and the thing with Berserkers is also very reliant on team comps, so it's not as consistent, just like Artillerist is sometimes not very consistent. Berserker can do a lot of damage and is very good at snowballing, which in solo queue is very useful, but overall it also struggles in certain situations. If you're insane on it, you can make it work, but overall it definitely struggles against very defensive teams, and that is kind of what the meta is. So I would say Berserker is somewhere here or like here, you know, either below Artillerist or above one level. I think they're always around the same level because they're very linear classes. I would actually, let's put it below Artillerist, I think we'll put it this. I think that's more accurate because you have no protected engages, and that will be pretty hard against so many Sorcs, right? Blade is definitely S tier still, although Blade struggles a lot against Sorcs, and it struggles a lot against Bards. It even struggles against Artillerists, to an extent Gunslingers, Sharpshooters, anything with range hard CC, Shadowhunter, Soulfist as well to an extent. So it is a little bit reliant on team comms as well. That's why it's not in broken tier. It does a lot of damage, it has a lot of punish potential, and overall is a really strong class. And now with the addition of Glavier, I would say it also basically solidified its spot there, because Glavier is not super great into Blade, and it's kind of hard to engage as a Glavier. So I think this is pretty good. So next up is Deadeye. Now Deadeye is always a little bit interesting because no one plays it, and therefore it's very hard to rank, but I would still say it's actually doing really well. So I would probably put it somewhere around War Dancer currently, maybe lowest S, but probably rather somewhere up here. I would probably put it right here at the moment. I think Deadeye is struggling a little bit because it's good against classes that want to challenge it in melee, but at the same time, as I said, there's so much range going on right now. There's no real reason to challenge a lot, and your sniper is also way worse than gunslingers. So it's definitely a little bit worse, and the swiftness changes and everything that we had like a couple months ago also hurt it a little bit. So I think this is a pretty fair spot for Deadeye. Gunlancer is definitely S tier. Now, is it above Bard or not? That one is is it above Bard? Is it not? I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it is. I think it's probably it's very similar, and it also provides very different tools. Honestly, sometimes I would say it's above Bard because it can also provide a little bit more damage. In some other team comps it's below Bard, so I would probably put it here for now. I think they're very similar tier. I think they're both very similar. Basically Gunlancer is the opposite of Bard, where it provides a lot of protection AoE with no real effort, but doesn't have a Rhapsody, and also is more of a tank and has a parry, has a good dodge, and can provide good damage output. Both awakenings are useful. It's really good. Next up is Gunslinger. Now Gunslinger is definitely I would say it's above Blade, but that's skill ceiling. So in low elo, Gunslinger is definitely worse than Blade, but on the highest levels, Gunslinger has so much outplay potential, so many tools, and so much damage, range pressure, good combos, a lot of mobility, probably the most mobility in the game with Lancemaster and Striker. I think Gunslinger is probably gonna be the highest S tier here. I think it's really, really good. And I also think it's above Blade just because it can adapt to teams more, because it has range tools and it has melee tools, so it can adapt to situations better. So in solo queue, Gunslinger is, well, I think highest S tier is pretty fair. Let's talk about Paladin. Paladin. I don't think I have to say a whole lot about that. That class is absolutely broken. The amount of damage reduction you provide, the amount of damage it can provide, it can almost do as much damage as a DPS while providing damage reduction, while being like insanely good frontline, having good catch tools, having a lot of self peel as well, having the best awakening in the game probably. It's pretty crazy. I think like there's nothing about it that is not absolutely broken, honestly. It's just not okay. I think this should be nerfed into the ground. Like Scrapper is the worst class in PvP. I'm just gonna say that. I think you can still do some things with it, and depending on team comps and how good your ping is, you need really good reaction time to make this work. For the sake of having consistent tiers and using all of the tiers here, Scrapper will be C tier. Scrapper is it lacks AoE, it lacks cleave, it lacks, well, short combos that actually work and aren't interrupted crazily, which it also does. Every single super armor it has is pretty long, and you need to use a dash to get out of it, which is not always good as well. The only redeeming factor really is the speed and the double dash, also providing you with a lot of outplay potential. Also, both awakenings need very specific setup for them to even, you know, work. I think Scrapper is probably the worst class in the game right now. In solo queue especially, you can still make it work, but again, it should be way better. I hope it gets buffed. The identity also is more of a downside than an upside, right? Maybe Advancing Strike needs a knock up in the beginning, but Scrapper overall is not amazing. You can still make it work. As I said, like everything on this list, you can still make it to Grandmaster at the moment, I would say. So if you're insane on Scrapper, you can still make it, but the class is just struggling. Soulfist is in a weird spot, because Soulfist, there's not many people that play it, first of all, so it's hard to rank. And those who play it also think it's not doing very well right now, which I can agree with to an extent. It has insane burst windows, insane team utility, but outside of the burst windows, it's pretty bad. Although it also has some range peel and stuff like that, so it's probably still an A tier. But the question is, where would I put it? Probably here. Probably below Deadeye, slightly, and above Artillerist and Berserker. I think in the highest level, if you can actually master this class, it can still be very explosive. And it's also good at adapting to team comps and your team comp, enemy team comp. It's good at adapting, but it struggles a little bit more now with like how the FOV works and everything. So the class is still good, but I would say before I would definitely have it ranked in S tier. Now it's mid A tier, so that's a pretty significant, you know, downfall, right? Shadowhunter. Now I would actually put Shadowhunter here, which is maybe a hot take, but I play a lot of Blade and Shadowhunter, and I would say Shadowhunter is a lot more utility in the sense that you can adapt. You have range pressure, you have melee pressure, you have hard CC, you have mobility. Like in all of those situations, it's pretty useful, right? Pretty useful class, and you can use it in any situation really. With Awakening, also having a hard CC on it, which is pretty hard to hit, but it's also useful. And very explosive combos, very quick combos, good mobility. I think it's a great class, and I think it's above Blade for sure. Artillery is worse than Deadeye? I think so. Actually, I would probably put it here. Actually, now that I think Artillerist is better than Soulfist. I think it's around the same level of Deadeye. In the current meta, with how many bards are playing and how many supports are playing, Artillerist is instantly good, right? I think it may be above Deadeye. I think it's very close. Let's just put it here for now. I think you may be right. Because of how many supports are playing, I think Artillerist gets just 2 more slots just because of that. Sorceress. I mean, you guys know what I think about that class. It's absolutely broken. The amount of hard stagger it has on literally every single ability, even on Punishing Strike, which is your main damage tool, is ridiculous. Has more mobility than most classes in the game with Identity. Insane combos. It's like playing Artillerist but good, you know? Artillerist but broken. The Awakening is good. Great AoE, great range pressure, great mobility, self-peel tools. Like the class has everything, and a lot of things are also bugged on it, like the anti-gravity keeping you in the air for way too long, the freeze orb basically dragging you in like a fucking black hole. Like there's a couple things about this class that are just not working properly, and that makes it even better, you know? So it's basically there's Artillerist in broken with mobility, right? Sharpshooter, I would say, is actually above Scrapper in that sense. Honestly, do we need a C tier? I don't think so. We'll do it like this. So Sharpshooter is also B tier, but I would say above Scrapper, because in some team comps, Sharpshooter is actually good. But overall, I would say it struggles, has way too high cooldowns still. If you don't hit your abilities with those high cooldowns, the class is useless. And at high level, a lot of people can dodge it pretty well. So I would say like the highest B tier is fair. Hopefully they do something with it, but it can be annoying. It counters some classes like Blade. Even Paladin struggles a little bit against Sharpshooter, but you know, it is what it is. I think it will probably go up a little bit more depending on the meta. Striker is actually performing better than I thought, and I would probably put it lowest S tier, actually, below Bard, maybe above Bard, probably below Bard. I think it's doing pretty well. And overall, the Tiger Dash also, depending on which build, obviously there's only one really viable build, is really good to run down Shadowhunters, Gunslingers, and Sorks, and you can see a lot of those classes in the meta. And if you're really good on it, you can also outplay Blades to an extent because you are faster, right? So if you have good mind games and you can read what the Blade is doing, you can also outplay that to an extent. Obviously, Blade is still hard to deal with. But I think this is what it will kind of look like. I think Striker is doing pretty well. I think you could also argue it's highest A tier, but I mean, yeah, I think that's pretty fair to say. I think that's pretty fair. The Summoner, actually, we should do Glavier first because we already have a Glavier. So Glavier is doing a little bit worse than I thought. I would probably put it 1 tier below Blade, because the class is just struggling a little bit in the meta because Sork is so prevalent. Also, supports are pretty good against Glavier, I would say, because the ranged spear combo is easily mitigated, the damage, right? The stagger loss, the hard stagger immunity loss on the stun is also hurting it a little bit. I think over time she will climb higher up in the rankings again once the meta changes a little bit. But for now, I think she's 1 below Deathblade. It's still insane. You need to be good on it though. You need to be pretty good on it. So I would put it right here. So the next ones are obviously a little bit speculation because we don't really know how these classes will interact with the meta. But generally speaking, in this current setup, Summoner will do really well. And I would say Summoner is probably around here, maybe even above Gunslinger. The class is basically a Sork with no mobility, but a little bit more annoyances. And some more damage output depending on the situation. So I think Summoner will do really well, especially in this meta, maybe even higher than this. But I would probably think somewhere here. Maybe highest S tier. Probably here. It's really hard to play against this with so many supports queuing. It's gonna be really hard, I think. Arcana is like a gimmicky class. It's a little bit cheesy. And because of that, it's probably somewhere here, maybe. Especially in this meta with, again, how much support we have and how much just AoEs everywhere. It's not going to be as easy to combo with her. But since the meta is pretty punish heavy, I'll probably put her somewhere here around Soulfist. We'll see when we even get this class, honestly, at this point. Scouter was changed in Korea, so it's a little bit more speculation. But I still think after the nerfs, it will be somewhere here. Like maybe around Shadowhunter Gunslinger level as well. The class has so many disjoints, ranged hard CC and everything. Good movement too, good combos. So I think it's probably somewhere there. Not much else to say about that, honestly. Reaper. Now Reaper is one of those classes. If you're good on it, broken. If you're bad on it, trash. So I would probably put it also somewhere in S tier. Maybe... On average, the average Reaper on high level will probably be somewhere here. I think it's a super annoying class. A lot of potential. A lot of damage if you know what you're doing. A lot of movement. But if you get caught, you're dead. Destroyer? Now, Destroyer, I'm not sure. Because in this meta, with how much range hard CC there is, it's probably not going to do very well. I'm assuming it's somewhere here around Artillerist. Maybe a little bit lower even. The class is really, really slow. Has a lot of mitigation, is really tanky, but it can be kited very easily. And Sork is perfect against Destroyer. Once we get Summoner, we'll also do worse. In the beginning, it will probably do okay though. But like overall, I think the class will struggle. And yeah, I think this is pretty accurate, honestly. Let me just see if I want to change anything. Maybe let me double check. I'm still not sure about Bard. Bard could be below Striker, honestly, because you can't. It's solo queue. I'm gonna put Bard below Striker. I think that's fair. I think Bard is struggling a little bit if your team doesn't do well, and that's just lowers her a little bit more. I think I'm pretty happy with the rest. Yeah, overall, in summary, I think it's a support ranged meta overall, and I don't think that will change a whole lot. We'll see if there's balance changes or anything, but I don't think there will be. So. If you want to climb ranked, this is in solo queue, of course. There's only solo queue. This is what I would be talking about. This would be the full tier list. If that helped you at all, consider subbing. And if you want to watch more, come over to Twitch, I guess. Have a good one, guys. Peace.